On top of that was the playing surface. It had been constructed just weeks earlier and was rock hard.
Went down, I think, the first day of training in the morning to have a look at the pitch. The players were going to take a run out on the pitch. We looked around, it was pretty sparse, pretty bare.
It was a terrible pitch. When we first went down there before the team arrived, and they were putting gallons and gallons of water on it, hoping to try and make it playable because it was really hard.
When we got to the training facilities, they were haphazard. They were poor. The pitch had craters in it. It was uneven.
For Roy Keane, none of this was good enough.
It wasn't perfect. And Keane, at that stage, wanted perfect. He was having a moan, and he let people know that it wasn't good enough. And McCarthy could see him and was aware that he was simmering.
Word starts to filter out that there is disquiet amongst the Republic of Ireland squad. You know, the journalists are talking. They know there's been a row at training. So whether this is going to be something that actually sticks and becomes a major problem, or it's just a storm in a teacup, who knows?
In the case of Roy, he was very frustrated, and his frustration was just bubbling up to breaking point.
While the press were desperate to get an interview with Roy Keane, they were being careful not to rock the boat.
I was really kind of conscious of, in this bubble that we were in. I didn't want to be sensationalist about it. I didn't want to make too much of it. I didn't want, them to come back after me like I was trying to kind of make something of very little.
It's not the first time that there would have been a story about Roy's temper around the Irish team. So, we probably didn't appreciate the significance of it in terms of what was to happen.
Day one of training was bad. Day two was worse.
There was the incident with the goalkeepers with Packy Bonner. Keane felt that the goalkeepers hadn't put enough in. The goalkeepers actually had been there first, and they had got a big head of sweat up before the rest of the team arrived. And Packy Bonner stood up to Keane, and Keane stood up to Bonner, and there was a few words had. Bottles of water were thrown.
Roy's anger suddenly threatened to destroy Ireland's World Cup campaign. And the story no one would write about would now fill the headlines.
So after that second day, after the big row, Keane went back to the hotel and he had a long think with himself and he said, well, I'm going home. I've had enough of this.
Following a training ground row, the Manchester United and Ireland captain informed manager Mick McCarthy last night that he was quitting the World Cup squad, citing personal reasons for his decision.
Obviously, I didn't want him to go home and tried to talk him out, but there was no way I was going to do it.
But by the next morning, the story had changed.
So we ran to the hotel, and the first person we saw was McCarthy in the lobby, and he comes over and he has an impromptu press conference, and he goes, well, Roy's staying, he's okay.
He's trained this morning, he's fine, he's in with the lads, they're all gathered round him, they're all together.
Keane cited undisclosed personal problems and a knee injury as his reasons for wanting to leave. Hours later, he had a change of heart.
There were questions at the other press conferences, probably with some of the players, asking them were they aware of this, unhappiness within the camp, and it was kind of brushed off because it's all sorted out now.
Roy does U-turn over a World Cup KO, whatever the headline was, Keane decides to stay after threatening to quit. And suddenly, what was happening now in Saipan was huge.
And even before this scare about whether Roy goes home or not, Roy's the big story, and you're looking to get him ahead of the World Cup.
RTE's Tony O'Donoghue was one Irish journalist looking to get Roy ahead of the World Cup, and he had a bit of luck.
I was walking on the beach and I met Roy, and he was with the physio Mick Byrne. I said what I'd heard, and I said, would you like to have a chat about it? And he said, let me have a think about it. And then the security guy, Tony Hickey, came to me and said, yeah, Roy will do that, but I think he's going to have a go at the FAI and the facilities. So, he doesn't want it to look like amazing. And I was going, Jesus, Tony, it is amazing. The hotel is fabulous, it was like white sand, azure skies, beautiful sea. So to set up the interview, we had to try and not make it look amazing. But in such a humid environment, that's where all the flies were hanging out as well. And when Roy came down to do the interview, we wanted to have everything ready. And when Roy came down to the interview, we just wanted to put up the mic on, and he said, you know, does it have to be here? And I went, well, Roy, you know, this is the best I could do to make it look shit.
So a lot of people say, well, it's typical of Roy, and Roy should really shut up, but I can't, especially if I'm captain of the team. We come over here, we travel halfway across the world, and the training pitch is a disgrace. Well, somebody's got to hold a hand up and say...
Remember a line that it was like training in a car park?
It's like training on a car park.
You could tell by his body language he was still very uptight, frustrated, annoyed.
Bloody rock hard. We've had 1 or 2 injuries already, and I expect a few more. And that's my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. Now, as I said, all I want is best, and if that's a crime, well, then I'm guilty.
Then, Roy gave Tony the scoop he was hoping for. Roy revealed he had decided to retire from international football at the end of the tournament.
I decided that it's best. I mean that, it's best for the team. That I called it a day and let somebody else come through. Got young players coming through. Young Healy, you know, another cop man, so I think it's about time they got a chance. As I said, I've just come to the end of the road regarding working with certain people, and I've had enough.
Tony may have recorded the first exclusive interview with Roy Keane, containing the bombshell news that he was going to retire. But he had no way to get the pictures back home.
It was the biggest sports story in the world that year. But the problem was, from a Saipan point of view, no local TV stations that had an uplink, no satellite facilities.
Premiership table. Unlike today, where there's file transfer, WhatsApp calls, Wi-Fi calls, text messaging, none of that worked in Saipan. It was such a difficult place to try and operate from a television point of view. Getting our pictures back to the UK and Ireland was so difficult. The material wasn't fed from Saipan, it was fed from Tokyo in Japan. So someone flew twice a week to come and pick up our tapes, to send them back so we would all have material.
Also, editing was a nightmare. I should add that as well. It was a newish system, and neither of us were particularly good on. But the deadline was the flight to Tokyo that left, I think it was about 3 a.m.
Tony sent the tape of his bombshell interview to Tokyo. But it would be many hours until it was received in Dublin. Until then, he had to keep the news to himself.
Jesus, let me see that.
While the TV reporters hoped their stories would make it home via Tokyo, RTE radio commentator Gabriel Egan had no such concerns.
It's an ISDN mixer, as it says on the top of the tin. And I would turn this on, I'd dial in to Dublin, headphones on. So it means I could talk to the studio in Dublin. I hit that button, and I've rolled, my tape is on pause here, so I open that channel, let the pause button go, and it runs down the circuit then through this machine back to Dublin.
This old-fashioned technology meant Gabriel was able to get his reports out of Saipan and onto RTE radio with ease.
He thought better of the decision he'd made, that he'd been a bit hasty, perhaps a bit hot-headed. He is a hot-tempered person, there's no doubt about that, Roy Keane. But you have to wonder, is this going to be the end of it? And that we don't know.
It's a good piece of gear, this. That must be nearly as old as me, that one, looking at it. Good God.
Day 3 of training was scheduled for rest and relaxation.
The next day was the golf day. A lot of lads went off to play golf. Roy Keane doesn't play golf. Roy stayed back in the team hotel.
And Roy, meanwhile, was up in his room, I think room 758, and just probably stewing.
In fact, he was expressing his anger with as much impact as possible in sit-down interviews with sports writers Paul Kimmage and Tom Humphreys.
Roy Keane gave 2 interviews to 2 journalists, big names in Irish journalism circles, to 2 big newspapers. He obviously realised that that would give maximum impact because they were big titles, the Irish Independent and the Irish Times.